Hello and welcome back to the Awakening Philosophy Podcast. My name is Jed. Thank you for joining me for those in the chat. And we are reading the Meno today. And to remind ourselves, Anytos has entered the picture. It started with Meno and his struggle to rule the conversation despite him having a terrible education, not having an understanding of the logos or the dialectic, or even what virtue is. But he wants to rule the conversation and make the conversation about whether or not virtue or the excellence of the soul that we seek as living beings, can it be taught? Can you teach someone to be a good person? So that was the struggle, because how do you ask about something's qualities, its teachableness, if you don't even know the thing itself? And how do you define the thing itself if you don't know the dialectic? And how do you learn the dialectic if you're not watching this channel? So if you're watching this channel, you are in the game and ahead of Meno. Good for you. Some claps for you. Anytos has entered the picture. And that's where we're at. Anytos has strong feelings against people who claim to teach what goodness is. The ones that are specifically taking advantage of and harming the youth who are paying for this education, we'll call them sophists. The people who profess to know but don't and are doing harm while cosplaying a knower. In society, like Meno's teacher Gorgias perhaps, we're going to call them sophists. And instead of letting Anytos rant about how these academics with their book learning are taking away what us real people know is good by common sense, instead of letting him go down that rant, anti-intellectual rant that we hear every day today, as true now as it was then, Socrates instead has pulled him up and said, okay, instead of going down that road, let's find out who the real teachers are, so we can address the self of Meno and benefit himself by sending him to this teacher of self-excellence. The word self comes up a lot in philosophy. Keep in mind, it means the honorific, so self-excellence, the highest kind of excellence. We're addressing the self of Meno, we're addressing his highest self, not his ego or his image or his reputation. And if we want to benefit someone, we have to benefit their self. And of course, if we want to be the sort of person who can benefit another person, if we want to be our ideal human being ourselves and therefore benefit people, we need to be ruled by a curious state of self, once again, that has the name phronesis. So we're wondering about what phronesis is, how it's tied to the self, and why it must be ruling our soul for us to be truly excellent and for us to be able to reach our highest happiness. So, what the heck is phronesis? And how do you learn it if it's tied to virtue? And specifically, who's going to teach us these things? How are we going to answer these questions? That's where we are in the text. Exciting stuff. Super important, super meaningful. And let me just refresh something down here. Hopefully I'm streaming. So super exciting stuff. Let's jump in where we are at there and keep playing together. Thank you for joining me in this game, the noblest game.
It's a win-win.
Socrates. Did these good and noble people that we recognize in our society come to be this way good spontaneously? By having learnt from no one, but are nevertheless able to teach others that which they themselves did not learn? Anytos says, I do suspect that these people learn from the previous generation. I got it from my mama. I got it from my mama. By being also noble and good. Or does it not appear to you that there have been many good people in this city? It does indeed appear to me, O Anytos, that there are good statesmen here, and there are even no less than those that came before. But there have also been good teachers, have they also been good teachers of the virtue of selves, the excellence of ourself? For this is what the Logos. So now we have a new clue about what the word Logos means. It's one of the questions we are carrying. What the heck is the Logos? It's a good question to be carrying. It's central because we're learning the art of the Logos. So the Logos of this conversation has been about not if there are good people here or not, nor if there have been in the past, but we are considering all along if excellence is teachable. Thus, by considering this issue, we are considering whether good people, both those now and before, also knew how to transmit to another this excellence which the good selves were. Or is this untransmittable nor receivable from one human being to another? This is the question which Meno and I have been searching after. Therefore, Anytos, consider it in this way from the Logos of thyself. Thyself being the highest part of yourself. So again, let's address the highest part of Meno, his self. Let's try and benefit himself. Let's try and find the good selves, ourself. Let's find self-virtue. And let's do all that in a conversation following the Logos of the self. Following the self Logos. Sorry, I had a hum in the background. My guitar was still plugged into my mixer, but it's been fixed. Consider it in this way from the Logos of thyself. Okay. Now, this is the dialogue with Anytos. Invited to follow the Logos in the way that we've been doing, the dialectic, from thyself. Would you say that Themistocles was a good man? Opening question. Why did Socrates start with that? I don't know. But I'm carrying that question as we read. I would indeed say that Themistocles was a good man, most exceptional of all indeed. Soc, is it not so then that he would also be a good teacher, seeing that if anyone was a teacher of the excellence of self, our definition of virtue right here, thank you Socrates, then that man would be one. If he was the most exceptionally good, then if anyone's going to be a good teacher of what it means to be good, it's this good guy here. Good. And I do indeed think so, if he really wanted to be one. Sock. But do you think that he would not have wanted for other people to become noble and good? And most especially the son of self? Remember, you can read it in 3 ways, including it. The son of it, the son of him, his son. Or do you think that he bore ill will towards self and deliberately did not transmit the excellence of which self was good? Or have you not heard that Themistocles had his son Cleophantos? Now that's a name for a kid. I shall call you Cleophantos. Phantos. Cleophantos. Have you not heard that Themistocles had his son Cleophantos taught to be a good horseman? Then indeed he used to stand upright upon a pair of horses and hurl javelins while standing upright upon horses. And he accomplished many other amazing feats as well, in which that man had self-educated, and in which he was made wise. Okay, he's made wise about horses? I didn't know you could be wise about horses. All of which require good teachers. Or have you not heard these things from your elder? Any, I have heard. Sock. Thus no one could lay blame by saying there was any defect in the natural ability of his son. He mastered horsemanship, didn't he? Any, that is not likely that he had a defect. Sock, what follows then? What follows then? That's a question we ask ourselves here. We talked about that last time, I think, or maybe in the Discord. In improvisational comedy or acting, there's of course the golden rule, yes and. When somebody gives a suggestion, you run with it, you don't block them. But also there's a principle, if this is true, what else is true? The and part. You build on the scene. So if somebody suggests something, if that's true in this universe we're in, what else is true? Which is the dialectic. If this definition is true in this universe that we are creating, what else is true? How does it function? How do those affected then function to others? How do they return back to the subject? And then in the universe where it's not true, what follows? So if this is true or not true, what follows? Pushing the implication. So somebody shared some art in the Discord, and a character wondering about reasoning and wondering about finding the meaning behind things. And it was really, really great. And the suggestion is, okay, if that's true, if this character has this question about reason itself, about the logos, what else is true? What's going to happen next? Would she meet other characters? Would she ask that question? Would she have a conversation? Would she have a dialogue? Would she have a dialectic? If this is true, what else is true? What follows then? Did you ever hear either from the young or the elders that Cleophantos, son of Themistocles, had become a good and wise man, just as his father? Not at all, said Anytos. Sock, take notice then. Are we to believe that he wished to educate his son in these matters, horsemanship, but on the other hand, when it came to the wisdom in which he himself was wise, he was made no better than his neighbors? If indeed, of course, excellence is teachable. So if excellence is teachable, this guy spent all his money teaching him to become wise in riding a horse and throwing a javelin. But then why didn't he want to become wise in what he is doing? After all, LeBron James has got his son Bronny James on the Los Angeles Lakers. He wanted to educate him in what made him great. By Zeus, that is not likely. What's not likely? Oh, it's not likely that he was made no better than his neighbors? Hi Nitro, welcome to the chat. How you going? Full of wonder, I hope. Surely, says Sock, of the previous generations, this man was among those who were the best teachers of virtue, as you yourself agree. Good? What's the good? Tell me of this good you speak of. How would you define it? But on the other hand, we must consider another one. This man was among those who were the best teachers of virtue, if you yourself agree. So Anytos wants to say he was a good man and a good teacher, even though he's never heard anyone say anything about Themistocles' son being wise as his father. We must consider, says Sock, Aristides, son of Lysimachus. Or do you not agree that Aristides was good? Any, I do indeed. In every way, without a doubt. Is it not so then, says Sock, that he also provided his son Lysimachus. Okay, so Aristides had a son Lysimachus, and Aristides provided his son Lysimachus with an education by the very best Athenian teachers in those subjects they maintain. Whereas, does he appear to you to have been made a better man than anyone? For surely you have also been in the company of this man, and see what kind of man he is. Then if you wish, consider Pericles, such a magnificently wise man. You know that he raised two sons, Paralos and Xanthippos. Any, I do know of these kids. I yelled at them to get out of my front yard when they threw their disc onto it. Sock. Then you also know that these two were taught to be inferior to no Athenian in horsemanship, and also they were educated in music and also wrestling, which I guess small clap, and all other subjects that are kept by art. Okay, so that there are subjects apparently kept by an art. That includes wrestling, music, horsemanship, Thus, did he not wish to make them, his kids, good men in this way? I was on mute. God damn it. So Socrates is pointing to these examples of people who are considered to be wise and good men, who have kids who were ratbags. Ratbags who were taught how to be from good teachers of horsemanship and music and wrestlings and other subjects kept by an art, but somehow, despite all that seemingly interest in making their sons better, these good men were not able to make their kids good. Therefore, Socrates says, virtue is not teachable. But in order that you do not think that this just happens to a few of the most lowly born who are Athenians who are unable to accomplish this business, take this to heart, that Thucydides also raised two sons, Melesius and Stephanos, and they were well educated in other ways, and they were the best wrestlers of the Athenian. For one of them was taught by Xanthias. And if you want to know how to spell that Xanthias, because you want to send him a birthday card or something, there it is. This thing, which is a letter, doesn't look like it. So this is how you would, I guess that's a capital X in Greek. A-N-T-H for the circle with a line. I-A. Look at this one. So, make sure you write that down for your birthday greetings you're going to email him. So one of them was taught by Xanthias. Other than being a famous birthday haver, what else do we know about him? And the other by Eudoros. And they were well reputed. They were well reputed to be the best wrestlers of that time. So that's who Xanthias and Eudoros were. The modern day versions of John Cena and The Miz. I don't know. Who's the best wrestler of our time? I don't know. I have heard of them. Xanthias, Eudoros, Hollywood Hulk Hogan, and The Ultimate Warrior. I've heard of those four. Is it not clear then that Thucydides would not ever have felt the need to teach his boys those subjects which cost money to teach, while he would not have then felt the need to teach them those subjects which cost nothing to make them good men, if it was indeed teachable? What? He would have taught them himself, which would have cost him nothing. For perhaps then, Thucydides was of lowly descent, and self did not have many friends among the Athenians and among her allies, and yet he was descended from a great family, and he had great influence in the city, and among the other Hellenes, so that, if indeed excellence were teachable, and if self did not have any leisure time because of his attentive care of the city, then surely he would have found someone else who would have been able to make his sons good, whether they were some native or foreigner. But I'm afraid, O companion Anytos, that virtue is not teachable. Interesting. So what's Socrates doing? He's setting out the questions and he's answering them himself. He's picking out the examples and pushing the implications himself. He's taking those implications and coming to conclusions himself. That's different from how he's been talking to Meno, where each of those stages, the setup, the definition, the premise, the functioning, the division, the conclusion, these are all questions that he asked, or stages of questions that he asked Meno. The categories of the dialectic we've been learning, posed as questions to Meno. Whereas here, his question is, have you heard of these people? And I'm going to put the pieces together. I wonder why Socrates is doing that. What do we have to go on? We have Meno's question when he came in. We have Meno's response to Socrates. We have Meno's state of mind. How does Anytos' state of mind and words, his logos and state of mind, that key pair of all of the key pairs we love to explore, head and heart, intelligence and care, states of mind, nous, and logos, they're the big ones. In fact, the logos is mastered through the dialectic. Our state of mind, the highest state of mind, is nous. But as we said, even with the dialectic and intellect, or nous, it could be harmful or beneficial. It all comes down to whether or not it is guided by self and helping guide people to the self, a certain curious state of self called phronesis, which we are wondering about. So those two big ones, the state of mind, the logos, and also we could add the three, the one that sits atop nous and logos, states of mind and words, the self. What has Socrates seen and judged about Anytos' state of self? Is it phronesis? Is it aporia or stung? His state of mind? Is he wondering? Is he curious? Is he open? Is he reflecting? Or is he certain about all his dumb beliefs that he got from his parents and common sense? State of self, state of mind, and what's the state of his logos? What kinds of words is he using? And how do those three differ from Meno? That may have led Socrates to conclude, I'm going to ask myself a few questions here, whereas I asked them of Meno earlier. So we can wonder about that. So, but I'm afraid, O companion Anytos, that excellence is not teachable because the rich people would have found somebody else that they would have paid. The poor people who were good men would have taught them themselves and would have saved them money. Where's that? Where do we highlight that? Yes. Teach them, cost them nothing. So all of these good men would have shown that they want the best for their kids, and they would pay money for the best teachers in wrestling, the best teachers in horsemanship, and so on. Why not the best teachers of virtue? So maybe they can't afford it. Well, then if they are wise themselves, they can save money, which is great for a poor person, and teach them themselves. And those with money would have found, and they were busy taking care of the city or something, they would have found somebody else to teach them. And because we've never seen that happen, Socrates concludes, virtue is not teachable. How does Anytos respond? And is it that state of aporia we spent so much time explaining is important and key to Meno? That whole part about being okay with being wrong, and you're benefited by being wrong, and we have this drop. Wait.
No one seems to.
Wait.
This guy.
Where's the joy? Where's the...
Wait.
There's only two options at the end of an
Here we go.
argument. One, you're wrong, but now you always get to be right about that topic going forward, so you get to learn something, which is always a plus. Or two, you're right and you get to revel in being right.
There.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win. That point that was made so well in the sound drop, Socrates made to us and Meno with that whole conversation with his slave boy. Hey, welcome Genevieve. Welcome to the chat. Hopefully that bow and arrow is for Apollo, the god that represents philosophy. What we're doing, reading, looking for the key terms, pulling out the logos, looking for the structure of the dialectic so we can read without interpretation, without projecting our opinions and beliefs, without trying to force reality to fit into our belief structure. Without doing any of that, we can read as it is or hit the mark, to use the archery analogy. And that whole thing, that description I just made, can be represented with Apollo. That's the significance of mythology. A complicated idea. Artemis. Your bow represents Artemis. Interesting. Say more about Artemis. How do you understand Artemis? Apollo is close. He has a bow and arrow and he represents philosophy. He represents what we are doing. Pulling out the key terms, reading it as is, so we can hit the mark in what we do. In our understanding, do we hit the mark? In our dialogues, in our actions, do we hit the mark? Now, of course, Apollo has a partner, Aphrodite, beauty. Which is why we have to read these texts, Apollo, in this kind of way, but then we have to spend as much time reflecting on what we've read, putting the pieces together. Because if we do that, we can take these Apollo clues, the self-logos clues, the key terms clues, and arrange them together and see, oh my goodness, they all fit together in a beautiful way to make a whole that's meaningful and inspiring and makes philosophy real and not dry and dusty, not for academics in their ivory tower. Makes it change our state of mind, makes it change our soul, hopefully to become more virtuous. It opens us up for higher states of mind and higher states of self, and ultimately higher states of functioning beneficially like a daemon. All of those ideas can be brought together into a single image, Aphrodite, the goddess of beauty, the goddess of the beauty that you recognize when you see all of the parts of reality come together into a beautiful whole, understandable or intelligible whole. That's inspiring. You need that. Otherwise, philosophy is dry and dead and just for debate bros and academic jerks to argue their own opinions and prevent the course of evolution. You need Apollo and Aphrodite together. Masculine and the feminine, you could even say. the inspiration to read, and the text to read. Aphrodite and Apollo. Is she not his sister? I think so, yeah. Daemon is my son's middle name. Ooh, that's cool. What we're learning about virtue, Socrates has said, by the way, if you find this virtue, it will lead you to your highest state of happiness and highest state of functioning, which they call being the thumbs up, good daemon. The daemon is the voice that we have that communicates to us our logos, guides us along our logos. Socrates talked about his daemon never telling him what to do, but pulling him up when he's about to make a big mistake. Now we recognize when we do midwifery every second day here, there is a similar voice that's much louder called the kaka daemon or bad daemon. The internal voice that communicates what's false about the logos, what's false about the self, that keeps our problems alive so we can learn the dialectic to understand, solve the clues of our problems, and free ourselves from our pathologos. So those are the two kinds of daemons we talk about. Of course, that's not a complete description. That's not a dialectical definition. That's just enough of a teaser to get your beak wet, to make you curious about what the heck is this daemon thing, and why is it so important that Socrates used it to guide his life. There's a dialogue called the Alcibiades where Socrates said, "I've been watching you, kid, because you got something special. But for years I wanted to talk to you about philosophy, about what you think it means to be good. But my daemon wouldn't let me approach you for years until now." At the end of his life, Socrates was put on trial for two accusations. Number one, using philosophy to be a debate bro dick. The official charge was using philosophy to make the weaker argument sound like the stronger one to corrupt the youth, which is exactly what all of the grifters and debate bros and PhD philosophers at university and media pundits and right-wing grifters and so on and so on, politicians, marketing department, business people, it's literally what they're all doing. That's what marketing is. That's what capitalism is. That's what modern politics is. That's what even modern philosophy is. How to quote people like Hegel and Nietzsche. So you're already above everyone else, because who else is going to quote Hegel and Nietzsche? Only other PhD philosophy, dusty old whoever's. So there's gatekeeping involved, authority involved. Bollocks to that. And are they learning philosophy to encourage everybody to play the game? No. They're using it to make the weaker argument sound stronger. What's the weaker argument? Their personal pathologos. If they're not doing midwifery, as we've been reading, they are a slave to their pathologos, to the false beliefs about self and reality, that they'll just spend their life passing on to others, sometimes charging a fee. That's why it's so important to do midwifery and reflect on our pathologos, because we don't have it, it has us. That's what we read yesterday. So that accusation was leveled at Socrates, the one person who's not doing that. The other accusation was he believed in a daemon that was different to the official religion. Again, people who know nothing about the nature of the self, the nature of the divine, the nature of the spiritual realm, telling someone who does, Socrates, that he's wrong because it's different than what they believe. The height of fucking stupidity. So those were the two charges. And Socrates said of the daemon charge, yeah, that's right. I listen to my daemon. That's the apology. So we can explore that sometime when we get into reading that. But yeah, so not enough to give you a definition of a daemon, but hopefully enough to get you inspired Aphrodite, enough to read Apollo in the new way that we are learning to read here. Because what happens when you have Aphrodite and Apollo together? Oh, Apollo's sister was Artemis. Oh yeah, no, yes, what you're answering. Yeah, Artemis. Yeah. Artemis is one of the 12 Olympian gods. But it's not in this triad that we're talking about here. This triad, which has Apollo and Aphrodite working together, is called the anagogic triad to represent the return. How do we become better? Anagogic means upward moving. So what happens if you have that inspiration, that beauty? You see that there is beauty in the world. You see that the pieces can fit and you can see them and understand them, and it's meaningful because you reflect. And you have Apollo, you're reading this text and the midwifery text, which reflect the logos. In this new way where we look for the self-logos terms and we look to arrange them in the dialectic, we hunt for questions, we hunt for mysteries. If you bring them together, they reach the top of that pyramid, the top of that triad, Hermes. Hermes is the god, the messenger god. He can race you back to Olympia. Race you back to Zeus. That's what we want. That's what we're doing here. By the way, the god Hermes, which is the hyparxis or the fullest flowering of Apollo and Aphrodite. Logos and states of mind. By the way, there's our pair. What they culminate into? Hermes that represents the dialectic. So, hopefully not enough to answer your question about the daemon, but hopefully enough to get you Aphrodite-like inspired to figure it out. That's a question I've been carrying for a long time too. So, I'm afraid, Anytos, that we can conclude that virtue is not teachable. Otherwise, these good men would have taught their kids. Either themselves if they were poor, or they would have found someone if they were busy and rich. Anytos. Oh, Socrates, you appear to me to easily speak badly about human beings. It's funny, considering who's saying it. Therefore, on the one hand, I will give you some advice. Imagine that, giving Socrates advice. Keeping in mind, advice is just personal opinions and beliefs. The very thing Socrates spent his life saying, this is what causes problems. You need to go beyond belief to understanding, and beyond understanding, and so on and so on. Imagine the irony. Let me give you some advice, old Socrates. Imagine taking Michael Jordan aside and saying, let me give you some advice on your jump shot, Michael. What? Who are you? Have you played basketball before? I've never played basketball before, nor have I heard of the sport. But let me tell you where you're making your mistakes, Michael Jordan. This is the pathologos. We've seen this, haven't we? And when we're reading the pathologos, people are motivated to cosplay or roleplay the knower despite not having learnt shit. People love it. That's what gossip's all about. You can pretend to be knowing and use your knowing to shit on people. That's why people have kids. They can act like they know about the world. This is how you should live. This is what religion you should be. This is what school you should go to. Da, 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 da. None of these people have done any work in midwifery or philosophy. Therefore, they are a slave to their pathologos ignorance. They are immature. It's as true today as it was with Anytos. Let me give you some advice, Socrates, if you will be persuaded by me. My advice, be careful, since perhaps it may be easy to do harm or benefit people. Since perhaps it may be easy to do harm or benefit to people in other cities, in this city it is very easy. But I think even yourself knows this. What the heck? And then he just leaves, exit Anytos. What the heck does that mean? Let's take to the skies. We are in space, which allows us to connect to the space internet. So let's open the space internet up. Ta-da! This is how we check Greek words and their definitions for ourselves. But also we have this guy. This is another translation of Meno. It's not as accurate, but it might shed some light on sometimes when the wording of the English is a bit muddled. Sometimes that happens in the Balboa. In every translation, it's good to look at another translation out every now and again to shed some light on what might be a bit hard to understand. I want the whole text. I wanted to give me the whole text. View text by. Oh my goodness. All right, we're doing it in chunks. 95A. Here we go. So this is the last thing we just read from Socrates. This is his conclusion to Anytos. This is the last thing Socrates said to Anytos before he dropped the smoke bomb and ninja'd his ass out of there. Socrates, well, is it not obvious that his father would never have spent his money on having his children taught all of those things and then have admitted to teach them at no expense the others that would have made him good men? Spent all his money teaching him stuff and he can teach virtue? He'd probably do it. If virtue were to be taught, will you say that perhaps Thucydides was one of the meaner sort? He was a mean man and had no great number of friends among the Athenians and allies? He who was a great house and had much influence in our city and all over Greece? Of course not. Look how much influence and power and friends he had all over Greece. Therefore, it can't be a lack of wealth or connections that caused him to fail to teach his kids the thing that he could have taught them himself. If virtue were to be taught, he would have found out the man who was likely to make his sons good, whether one of our own people or a foreigner, were he himself too busy owing to the cares of state. Ah no, my dear Anytos, It looks as though virtue were not a teachable thing. There's our conclusion. In a kind of a mini dialectic Socrates had with himself in front of Anytos. Why? To show him something? Could Anytos play? State of mind, his words, his sense of self? Maybe he didn't qualify. What's Socrates doing? And is he benefiting Anytos by coming to this conclusion in front of him, with him? Kind of with him, but maybe he's allowing him to play as much as he can. A lot of things to wonder about here. Anytos' response before he hightails out of there. Socrates, I consider you are too apt to speak ill of people. Oh my gosh. How dare you? I, for one, if you will take my advice, would warn you. To you, Socrates. Oh, I'd warn you, Socrates. I'd do this with my fingers to you, Socrates. To be careful. In most cities, it is probably easier to do people harm than good. And particularly in this one. I think you know that yourself. So, Anytos was triggered by this conclusion that goes against his belief that you can teach virtue, you learn it from your parents. Very pathologos, very baby brain. Despite all the reason and evidence suggesting an opposite conclusion, Anytos' reaction was what? Was he happy to be wrong, like the slave boy, happy to be wrong about math so he can be corrected? This quote from this ancient Greek female philosopher.
There's only two options at the end of an argument. One, you're wrong, but now you always get to be right about that topic going forward, so you get to learn something, which is always a plus. Or two, you're right and you get to revel in being right. It's a win-win.
Was that his reaction? No, the opposite. What's he saying? Well, what we read in the Balboa, we can now understand better. It may be easy to do harm or benefits to people in other cities. In this... See, I think the actual text here would be, it may be easier to do harm than benefit to people in other cities. In this city too, it is very easy to do what? Harm your enemies. What was the first definition of virtue that Meno gave? Do good things to your friends and harm your enemies. Of course, he didn't know what it means to be good. So how will he know who his enemies are? What if he's mistaken about his enemies? By the way, would a good person want to do harm to anyone? Are people made better if you do them good or if you do them harm? So falls down very quickly. Any of those questions can blow up that stupid baby brain idea that virtue is the good guys shooting the bad guys and the good guys getting the princess. Stupid shit. But who thinks that way? What's Anytos doing? Threatening his enemy? Who's his enemy? The one who can actually help him. The one person who can do him benefit, do benefit to his soul and his self, is the one Anytos wants to harm if he carries Meno's idea of virtue. The modern man's idea of virtue. Punish the bad guys, give the treats to the good guys, which is why all the rich people are trying to pretend to be the good guys. And all the Republicans are saying, it's our team that's the good team. We're the good guys, the one doing the genocide and stealing all the money and killing all the people so we get really rich. So we deserve all the money and the treats. Because that's just. Treats for the good guys, us, always us. And harm to our enemies, which is anyone different. Or anyone not us. very ignorant, very stupid, very common. Meno and Anytos had various versions of it. Meno had a little bit of more education. Maybe that's why he's able to engage in this reflection, whereas Anytos can't. He's out the door straight away. He's throwing threats straight away. Why is it that so many people have such a stupid view of virtue and justice that breaks down very quickly if only they reflect with logos for a little bit? That is the cause of so much suffering, harm, inequality, crime. Pretty much 90% of our problems as a human race comes down to this stupid idea of virtue that Socrates popped the balloon of. Where are the balloons? There we go, some balloons. Popped that balloon very quickly. Doesn't it reflect the pathologos that all human beings get? That becomes the psychic parasite controlling their lives until they realize that they can solve their problems through the logos and midwifery? What does the pathologos do? Attacks the best people, attacks the best people who can function with the logos. The zombies attack the people who are alive. We just talked about Socrates being murdered by the state for being not a sophist. That you're a sophist, you're a debate bro. You use your fancy words to manipulate people for your profit. The one person not doing that, they kill. Socrates. You have a connection to your daemon, that every human being has a job to develop that connection, to have that relationship. The end of virtue is to be the good daemon. You might even unify with that daemon. So the person who have achieved the best thing, that's an excuse to call them, to justify your prejudice that they are bad. That's intimidation. To use whatever they're doing, could be right, could be wrong, could be anything, pretend it's wrong, and then use it as a justification for the negative image, the enemy image of that other person being innately bad, heathen, sinner, goyim, heathen, heretic, non-American, so on and so on. That kind of intimidation where anything is clip-chipped, taken out of context just to prove that this person is innately bad so that you can justify harming them, because that's really what you want to do, harm them. You're motivated by harming people in the same way you were harmed when you got your greatest harm, your pathologos, the thing that causes your continual harm and suffering. We do unto others what was done unto us. Therefore, if part of being a good person, according to the pathologos, which is the opposite, is killing anyone who can help you, killing anyone who can bring you out of the pathologos, you have to have an idea of good or justice or virtue that justifies harming people. Well, harming doesn't help anyone. You don't help a horse by beating a horse. You don't make a student better at learning math by punching him in the face. You don't make a person a better person by harming them. That's stupid, violent, and immature. To justify it, if your goal is to do it anyway, justify it by saying this person is innately bad, which means they can never be made better through reason and understanding and all that. Therefore, I get to torture them the way my daddy tortured me or my mummy tortured me. That's the human condition. Like it or not, that's what it is. And that might help us understand why both Anytos and Meno, people from two different backgrounds, Anytos anti-intellectual completely, Meno very much proud of his education, both are threatening Socrates. Obviously, Meno can participate in the logos, share in the conversation, share in the logos, share in the dialectic for longer than Anytos. Anytos, he's been 2 pages and he's out the door. But why is this sick idea of justice involved separating people into good and enemies and friends? And why does it require harming one of those groups? All this is keeping in mind that you have no idea who your friends are. What if you're wrong? What if your friends are the bad guys? What if what you think is good is bad? And so on and so on. Breaks down very quickly. So, Anytos. By the way, Socrates, you're talking about virtue being what benefits the self. And even if you have an education, even if you have the logos, even if you have nous and you remember the nature of reality, that's not sufficient, because that's not necessarily harmful or beneficial. It's how you use it. And if you use it to help people reach this mysterious state of phronesis of the oneself, and you encourage them to have it rule or guide their soul, that's what makes it beneficial. Therefore, phronesis is virtue, or a key part of virtue. We don't know which yet, and how to get it. That same idea, whether we do harm or benefit, Anytos is playing with in a different kind of way, not to direct us to what makes the difference, what makes nous and dialectic beneficial or harmful, not to help us learn. He's using that phrase, hey, you could do harm or benefit, so shut up and watch yourself. Stop talking, stop doing the philosophy, stop asking questions, stop challenging my beliefs from my daddy who I love, and my daddy can beat up your daddy, and don't you dare say anything bad about my mummy or I'll kill you, I'll go to war. So don't you say that they were wrong when they told me you get virtue by copying them. If you're concluding with reason that excellence is not teachable, otherwise these other parents would have taught their kids, that challenges my pathologos ignorance. That all I have to do is copy my parents and all of a sudden I have excellence. Don't even have to go to school like Meno. Don't even have to read a book. Just common sense, right? Says the person who thinks virtue somehow involves harming people who you don't like. Is that the nature of humans today? Are these the nature of our rulers today? Even our supposedly more enlightened educators, do they still engage in punishment, harming people they don't like? Through what? Detentions, expulsions, bad grades, all that kind of thing? So, Anytos, hey, by the way, it's easier to harm people to benefit them, which is kind of true. We've talked about how much you need the virtues to begin the quest to become a better person. Then you have to read Apollo. You have to be lucky enough to have a text with the actual ancient Greek, because all of the past translations we've been fed for the last 1,000 years has been garbage. We've talked about how often the word self is used and how significant it is. The self has never been translated. The key self logos term, the key term of phronesis has never been translated today. Even in this translation, thankfully we have the Greek so we can find the very key turning point of this whole goddamn book, Phronesis. It hasn't been there. So whatever they're doing at colleges, it ain't philosophy. That's not a personal criticism, that's just a true fact. What we do about it determines our character. Are you going to be like Anytos and cry, "Don't you challenge my..." I believe that real philosophy happens at university. They know what they're talking about. I spend all this money, says Meno, on my education. Are you going to be like that? Are you going to be like Anytos and threaten anyone who challenges your beliefs? Well, I am a professional philosopher. I don't like you saying such things. Hold your tongue, dear boy. Are you that kind of a jerk, like Anytos? How many people would respond in that way? Hey, aren't we all entitled to our own opinions? It's my opinion that when I'm harming people, that I'm not harming them. So let me continue to harm them. Because, you see, David Hume once imagined that... Get out of here with this crap. If it is true, it should be demonstrably true through the logos and dialectic to all those who want to see it. You don't exclude, you don't threaten, you don't pick teams, you don't have to be Jewish to see the truth. You don't have to be a man to see the truth. You don't have to be Protestant to see the truth. That's the significance of understanding. That's why Socrates can talk to someone like us, philosophers, someone like Meno, someone like Anytos. Famously, he's spoken in the symposium. It's mentioned he talks to housewives and blacksmiths, as well as generals and politicians. Everyone can play. It's our birthright. It's what we're here for. Literally. It's the only thing that can solve our problems, so it might be why we're here. And it's the only thing that can lead to virtue. Because how else are you going to know what virtue is unless you are reflecting on it and understanding it? Differentiating it from opinions and beliefs like Meno's opinions and Anytos' opinions. So we are following the logos and we still don't know what it is. That's how important the logos is. Therefore, could it be why we're here? Anyway, so interesting response by Anytos. Oh, you're right. It is more difficult to be beneficial and be virtuous and good. But you know what isn't difficult? Harming people. I'm such an unjust person, says Anytos, that you telling the truth that conflicts with my personal family beliefs. I don't care about being a good person. I will harm you. So you watch yourself, Socrates, says Anytos. Foreshadowing, perhaps, of Socrates' eventual murder for being the best and helping in the best way. Interesting character, this Anytos, right? Actually, let's go back into space. Because, let's see if there are any footnotes. Okay, none here. Here. Anytos goes, let's have a look. Anytos goes away. His parting words, this is the footnotes of the Loeb translation, or the Fowler translation. Anytos goes away. His parting words show that, in Plato's view, he regarded Socrates as an enemy of the restored democracy, which he hints has popular juries only too ready to condemn such an awkward critic. Yeah. The pathologos stops the logos. People with money and power have money and power to play out their pathologos to stop the logos. Anyone questioning their ignorance and harmful beliefs would be considered a critic. Is that the nature of the pathologos? If you know the nature of the logos and pathologos, is this obvious for us? Does it describe our current world? Socrates replies to the exit, "Oh, Meno, it appears that Anytos is angry Anytos. But it does not surprise me at all. For first of all, he thinks that I am accusing these men." So, Socrates is seeing something all at once straight away. Interesting. What's he seeing? Let's see. First of all, he thinks that I am accusing these men. The ones we've said are good. Second, he lets himself believe. He has a false belief he is not challenging. That self is one of those. He thinks that he is one of those good people in that list. Thus, on the one hand, if he ever recognizes, what's the opposite of belief? Recognition. How can you recognize? By understanding and seeing it for yourself, by reading in this way, following the dialectic of Socrates and doing a dialectic yourself. That's one way to recognize the truth that everyone can play. A way of joining our human race and joining our soul, because everything you do, you could be doing the dialectic on. Because everything follows the dialectic. It's the paradigm of reality. So you have an activity that you can unify your whole soul and being towards. Isn't that neat? Also, the dialectic opens a different kind of recognition called remembering. You're remembering the true nature of beauty, justice, remembering the true nature of beauty, justice, courage, sameness in the experience of nous, a different kind of recognition. Now, what we've been saying is, on the board, this recognition of dianoia through the dialectic and logos leads to this next level of cognitive function, nous, which is another remembering of courage, justice, being. But both of them could either be harmful or beneficial depending on if they both come together to serve this. Just like Apollo and Aphrodite, let's put Apollo down the bottom, Apollo, Aphrodite come together. Both of these circles have to come together to reach Hermes, the dialectic. Notice the same principles, the same structure, the same relationships. This is a fundamental principle in reality. Terms may vary, relations stay the same. That's how come we can think, because we think by making analogical connections, looking for sameness and difference. What's the same about dianoia that we can develop in the physical world, nous that we develop by experiencing the metaphysical world, using them both together to reach the state of phronesis? How is that similar, like and unlike, to Apollo and Aphrodite being used together to reach their hypaxis, their highest point, their apex, Hermes? We can ask that question because of analogy, because of structural similarity. The same pattern applies here and here. Why? Because for there to be these three levels of reality, it has to unfold from the first cause somehow. There has to be a creation or an unfolding. That's the logos and dialectic. That's the pattern. But even this has to unfold the next realm, our physical realm. So that logos emanates all the way through, which is why the logos and dialectic is also our journey home. That's why Hermes is the god that, with the wings on his feet, he rushes you home. That's why those three, Apollo, Aphrodite, and Hermes, are called the anagogic or upward moving gogic, upward moving logos, analogos, analogy, anagogic, upward moving analogy, using analogies and reason to move up. By the way, is Socrates able to see the state of self of Anytos? His state of mind? He's angry. Did he say he's angry? Did he able to recognize his logos, what he thinks and believes? So how is Socrates able to see all this so quickly, straight up, all the way at once? And how would it relate to the art of medicine? That's analogy. So we've noticed a puzzle in the text. Socrates, in what we're reading here, is able to talk about his state of mind. Anytos is angry. He can see his logos, his beliefs. First of all, he thinks this, and second, he believes that. So we can see what he thinks, and he can see what he believes. And earlier in the text, we talked about how beliefs cause problems, because beliefs don't have to be true or good. And if people manipulate your beliefs, they can get you to do bad things that harm you. So your belief that the bad thing is good can lead you to do a bad thing that will harm you. Whereas if you recognize for yourself that it's bad, you won't do it, because bad things harm you. So if he ever recognized that which is speaking badly, that which speaking badly is, so if he figures out what it means to speak bad, what is pathologos or anti-logos or sophism, debate bro, or just being pathologos triggered, then he will stop being angry. Whereas now he does not recognize this. So let me redirect the conversation to you, Meno. Tell me, are there good and noble people among our citizens? So he's restarting the same question, only before he asked a specific. He was more physical, he was more particular. He asked Anytos, is Themistocles a good man? Whereas with Meno, he said, is there any good men? So he's, what's the word? Not coddling, but he's more helpful to someone like Anytos. He's more open with someone like Meno, which is curious. So we've noticed a puzzle. How can Socrates, Anytos has barely said anything. He can tell him his problem. Number one, he's angry and doesn't recognize what it means to speak badly. We might say he has a pathologos and he doesn't know it. He doesn't even know what it is. Number two, his states of mind, angry. He's able to see that straight away. How? And he says, by the way, if you understand what speaking badly is, you'll stop being angry. In our work on midwifery and reading the midwifery book together, we read and learned for ourselves that anger is a response to that original pathologos injustice that we haven't yet addressed. We have an unsolved puzzle we are here to address. And it's not fair to carry an insult about yourself. It's not fair to diminish yourself. It's not fair to accept a mask that's less than what you really are. That unfairness our soul recognizes, and that's our anger. The problem is, if we don't understand what pathologos is, we will think that our anger is about other people. Just as Anytos is angry at Socrates. Why? We read this last time. Interpretation. He is projecting his pathologos ignorance onto Socrates, and he's angry about it, when really he's angry at his own pathologos. That's the human problem. We talk about reactionary people and conservatives and baby brain people imagining stuff pretending the other person is that imagination, and then getting so angry at them. We say, oh, you're telling on yourself. That person didn't say that. The fact that you're imagining it tells me more about your problem. So why do we project our interpretations of our pathologos beliefs onto reality and then get angry at it, which causes our injustice? Because, hey, Anytos is quite willing to kill Socrates, act in the most worst way against the best person. Why do so many human beings do that? Socrates is saying because they don't know what speaking badly or the pathologos is. So we have the word kakos, which is bad, and ligin, speaking, tied to the logos. Bad logos. If Socrates is right and he knows what stops us from being angry, it's simply freeing us from what that anger is pointing us to. The injustice of the false belief about the self that's infecting us. It has us, we don't have it, controlling us like a zombie. Anytos is a zombie. So we say waking up. Therefore, when Socrates is saying if he ever recognizes for himself, sees for himself, what it means to have a pathologos or a kakadaemon, bad daemon, the voice of the pathologos, only when you see that can you stop being angry. Because that person you're angry with, it'll be a different person tomorrow. Collectively, it'll be woke. It was woke yesterday. It'll be DEI tomorrow. It'll be Mexicans the next day. It'll be the Chinese the next day. It'll be women the next day. There'll be another person to get angry at. All the while, you are being led by your false beliefs, being grifted and manipulated by the biggest sophists in the world. That's the human problem. Only when we are waking up to what it means to be speaking with the pathologos or speaking with the logos, that's why we read this, the logos, and then every second day we read midwifery, which is the pathologos. Only then can you stop being angry. And who are you going to project your anger onto? The best people. So if you want to have the best kind of conversation like this with the best kind of person like Socrates, you better do the work on what's causing your anger, your pathologos. You better learn what it means to speak badly because of your pathologos. And by reading this, the logos, you better understand the hierarchical difference of the terms in our mind. Our mind can think cognitive function with images. It can think with opinions. It can think with beliefs. Pathologos beliefs, prejudice beliefs, simple beliefs, scientific beliefs. It has dianoia understanding. That's where you can actually recognize things. Has nous, where you recognize it directly. You can confirm your understanding, indirect experience. And then a phronesis, which is even beyond that. That's our goal. You have to be reading this text to recognize that we have these different abilities. Some of them terrible, some of them good. That's our movement. That's our personal growth. That's spiritual growth. That's philosophical growth. It's all the same growth to the self through the logos, so you can recognize it and not be manipulated by the beliefs of others or manipulated by your angry states of mind because of the unsuspected beliefs that you are still being led around by the pathologos, the most insidious force in the reality, that which turns human beings into immature zombies, harming themselves and each other. That's the situation we're in. Socrates is laying it all out for us, for anyone who wants to play. If you're like Anytos and you're just pissed that it's challenging the beliefs you grew up with, then fuck off. Sorry, that's a bit harsh. Then change your mind and play. Don't fuck off. Don't fuck off like Anytos. Don't just, oh, I'm triggered, I'm mad, I'm going to get you and I'm out of here. Don't be like that. At least stay in it with Meno. Meno's struggling to be okay with not knowing. He's struggling to be stung. He's struggling to give up his leadership, to admit that he was wrong and he's ignorant, he needs to learn, but at least he's still here. Then, of course, there's the slave boy who did even better than the other two. What does that tell you? So, we won't be able to participate in the dialectic and logos with someone like Socrates to answer our question, what is our highest excellence? How do we get there? What is this phronesis? Can it be taught? We couldn't do any of that. We're completely blocked from our own development, just like Anytos, actively sabotaging our own development, just like Anytos, projecting onto the best people our images of the worst people, just like Anytos. We are stuck and blocked and functioning in a very unvirtuous way that we incorrectly believe is virtue. We will not be able to play unless we stop being angry. We will only stop being angry if we recognize for ourselves, through dialectic that means, what the speaking badly is or what the pathologos is. The only way of doing that is to read the philosophical midwifery book that we'll be reading tomorrow. So on that teaser, I hope to see you tomorrow, where we're jumping back into the philosophical midwifery book and doing this very thing that Socrates says Anytos should be doing if he wants to be a good person. So let's learn from his mistake and not be one of the people who are killing Socrates and killing our own development. Let's do what we need to free ourselves from our zombie virus and become an active participant in our own psychic and spiritual development, all the way to the end, because there is an end. Let's see it in the text. Whether it's the virtues of the soul, like even-temperedness, quickness and learning, it has to be coordinated with nous, but it has to be guided by phronesis. When the soul is guided by phronesis, anything she attempts or endures ends in eudaimonia, good daemon, happiness and state of functioning. Ends. There's our goal. Whereas if you are led by anti-phronesis, the pathologos, you'll end up as a kakadaemon, doing unto others the same bullshit oppression and crushing of yourself that your kakadaemon does to you. Seeking an opportunity to do the same harm you are suffering from and are therefore angry about. Those are our choices. Meaning there is an end. It's something to do with being the good daemon. Having a soul guided by phronesis beyond nous, something to do with the self. Coordinated with nous. And of course, through the logos and dialectic. That's our goal. Simple as that. All human beings who are good and seeking the good. But can't do that until you understand the pathologos. Once you do that, you can free yourself from your anger and come back to sharing in this, the noblest game. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for everyone who stopped by and chat. Thank you for the saying hello, sharing thoughts and questions. And I hope to see you tomorrow so we can do this. So we can be better than angry Anytos. I'll see you then. Bye. And bite a chicken. And bite a flamingo. Quick! Bite that flamingo.